is from Diane Herndl's Men in Feminisms. What does men have to do with feminism? The semantic difficulties of even asking this question are illustrative. Does it mean what place do male critics have in feminism, or what place do men have as subjects in feminism, or could it mean what does feminism have to offer toward coming to a clearer understanding of men? Okay, keep going in there. This is from Jackson Katz's The Macho Paradox. The special challenger of gender violence prevention politics is that women's trust of men is not a given. Some women are understandably wary of men's motivations and are skeptical about their commitment to gender justice. As increasing numbers of men get involved, they worry that men might try to take over the feminist movement or take it in a direction that suits men's needs rather than women's. So Tina Phillips, the role of men in feminism. What is the role of men in the feminist movement? Some believe men are not or should not be a part of the feminist movement. Some believe that the movement is about women and for women, and thus should be made up of women alone. However, I believe that without men, the feminist movement cannot achieve its aims. Solidarity between women and female identified people and male identified people is mutually beneficial and is necessary for the liberation of both. I believe that men and male identified people can organize for their own liberation through social feminism. Men and male identified people can benefit directly from socialist feminism, since it allows them to develop a full range of emotional expression and encourages them to take on the role as caregiver to children and their families, and not see their jobs as their sole source of self-worth. Among other benefits, socialist feminism allows them to embrace cooperation over competition and gives them the opportunity to unlearn aggressiveness and overcome violence and embrace femininity is just as important in one's life as masculinity. Okay, so traditionally, feminism has had the idea that men bad guys, women victims. And for the most part, a lot of that's true. But unfortunately, it creates a binary by which either of those people can never really escape. Women are always placed in the role of fragile victim, men always in the place of senseless, feral abuser. And so because of that, you're going to have difficulties in communication. Let's move forward. So this is Bell Hooks' will to change. True feminists do not tell the truth, feminists do not tell is that men are longing for love. This is the longing feminist thinkers must dare to examine, explore, and talk about. Those rare visionary feminist seekers who are no longer all female are no longer afraid to openly address issues of men, masculinity, and love. Women have been joined by men with open minds and big hearts, men who love, men who know how hard it is for males to practice the art of loving in patriarchal culture. Clearly, we cannot dismantle a system as long as we engage in collective denial about its impact on our lives. Patriarchy requires male dominance by any means necessary. Hence, it supports, promotes, and condones sexist violence in public discourses about rape and abuse by domestic partners. By the most common forms of patriarchal violence are those that take place in the home between patriarchal parents and children. The point of such violence is usually to reinforce a dominator model. So, growing up, how many of you grew up in a mixed company of both boys and girls, your own age? Okay, a good number, okay. Most modern civilizations don't follow the tradition of separating boys and girls at birth, raising them separately, and then kind of forcing them together at some later point. So boys and girls are always learning in the same house, which means it's not that boys and girls are learning two educations. It's the same education. Is there someone at the door? Oh. Oh, okay. So it isn't necessarily that boys and girls are learning separate educations. It's the same education that supports and condones this binary of oppressor-oppressed. This isn't going to work. I don't think this, it's just too complicated. I'll just keep going. Herb Goldberg's The Hazards of Being Male. Quote, most men live in harness. Richard was one of them. Typically, he had no awareness of how his male harness was choking him until his personal and professional life and his body nearly falling apart. Richard had to get sick in his harness and nearly be destroyed by role-playing masculinity before he could allow himself to be a person with his own feelings rather than just a hollow male image. Had it not been for a bleeding ulcer, he might have postponed looking at himself for many years more. Like many men, Richard had been a zombie, a daytime sleepwalker. Worse still, he had been a highly successful zombie, which made it so difficult for him to risk change. Our culture is saturated with successful male zombies, businessmen zombies, golf zombies, sports car zombies, playboy zombies, etc. They're playing by the rules of the male game plan they have lost touch with or are running away from their feelings and awareness of themselves as people. They have confused their social masks for their essence, and they are destroyed themselves. While fulfilling the traditional definitions of masculine appropriate behavior. So one thing Bell Hooks talks about is the fact that even though men are kind of forced to play roles of nonchalant, non-connected, non-emotional, don't cry, those kind of things, don't show caring, don't do anything that's usually ascribed for women, such as housework or babysitting or any of those kind of things. In a sense, as they continue to live within this fake reality, in a sense, they become less and less and less people. Aaronette White, Ain't I a Feminist? Specifically, Aaronette White is looking at black men, but I kind of found a piece that doesn't specifically focus on race. How men learn to confront patriarchy and become feminists can be understood through the narratives of those who are living the experience. It can respond to patriarchy in a number of ways: acceptance, adaptation, avoidance, withdrawal, not noticing, denial, or straight-up confrontation. Their feminist development appears to go through phases of progression, regression, and suppression, revealing the inherently fragile, contradictory, and context-bound aspects of their resistance and compliance. Feminism does not make men less of a man, but more. Feminism, paradoxically, makes men whole, rather than breaking them down or emasculating them. Let's get to Freire. Is he next? He needs to be. Not yet.
Can we go back to that last one and talk about it? Because that one was really strong. Go back to it. Yes, the self-made man concept would be something that you can, you guys over here can contemplate, because by and large, who's raising the children in society? The women. And so, by and large, whenever a man walks away from what he has been taught by the mother, he's walking away from feminism, because originally they were raised by the mother, right? They were instilled by values by the mother. But society says, quit that, walk away from it. So re-embracing the concept of feminism is what this author is saying, is what making our men whole, because they go back to the root of their home where they were raised by their mother. They go back to the original nurturing that they get. Does that make sense to you? in a way where, are you different when you're with your mother than when you are with your dad or with your friends, your male friends? Are you different? And that's one thing that is a powerful thing to look at. Keep going now.
Okay, so the key point here is every day we have a series of choices to make in regards to how we perform our gender. So as men, and I should note that when we're looking at men and feminism, that doesn't specifically just mean heterosexual men. That's heterosexual men, homosexual men, bisexual, pansexual, asexual. Every male falls under this category. So on an everyday, in everyday occurrences, there you go, we have the opportunity to disconnect ourselves from a pattern whereby we're kind of, where we suppress others. Nora Vincent, I love Nora Vincent's book. Nora Vincent believed that men don't have hard lives. She believed that she would discover in the course of her novel that it was easy being a man, and all the things she was denied as a woman would be granted to her the moment she became a male. So she dresses up as a man and lives, I believe, 3 to 5 years, I can't remember what. As a male, goes to a totally new town as a male, meets new friends, gets a new job and everything, under the guise of a male being called Ned. So these are some of the things she found. It was hard being a guy, really hard. And there were a lot of reasons for this, most of which, when I recount them, make me sound like a tired and prototypical angry young man. I didn't like how wooden I felt, and, sorry, that's a mistake. Thank you. To make myself in order to pass as a believable guy. I had to do a lot of crossing out when I crossed from woman to man. I hadn't anticipated this when I started as Ned. I had thought that by being a guy, I would get to do all the things I didn't get to do as a woman, things I always envied about boyhood when I was a child, the perceived freedoms of being unafraid in the world, stamping around loudly with my legs apart. So, in the course of Self-Made Man, she gets friends, and she's shocked to find that each of them, in front of their wives, they try to act strong and don't have fears, and then secretly behind closed doors among other men, they start talking about they don't know what they're going to do, I'm so worried, I have a family, and so on and so forth. But everybody on the outside is fighting to make sure that their masculinity is never questioned. Okay, finally, Paulo Freire writes Pedagogy of the Oppressed. This is the most pertinent part of the text in terms of gender. This, then, is the great humanistic and historical task of the oppressed, to liberate themselves and their oppressors as well. The oppressors who oppress, exploit, and rape by virtue of their power cannot find it in this power the strength to liberate either the oppressed or themselves. Only power that springs from the weakness of the oppressed will be sufficiently strong to free both. So, think of a good example. Okay, imagine all the white space, this entire screen. So in the defining of what is female, this big colored box, we'll say this, everything that falls within that box we'll call feminine, female, woman. Has the male, who also once had the ability to run the gamut of this space, has the male expanded his territory, or has he diminished it? Anybody? Let me re-say that. If this box, this square that you're looking at, if this represents the totality, the complete possibilities for gender, and men decide to say, okay, everything within this a projected picture we'll call feminine, womanly, etc. Has the male, who now has everything else, expanded his ability to live, or has he cut it in half almost?
He's cut it in half almost, because the majority of how you say men-based things and feminism, when you think about it, it's not just one small piece, it's a broad aspect of things. So it's like you're minimizing the amount of things that you can actually talk about and explain on feminism, pride, and all this other stuff. So yeah, he would be minimizing it if he was just that. It's
Yeah,
like,
exactly. Because now he can't cross over into these areas without instantly having to deal with words like sissy, faggot, and everything else. So he can't show emotions. When his mother dies, he has to hold it in. Yes, that means he'll have to go see a psychotherapist at one point because it's not natural to hold in those kind of emotions. And everyone around him is telling him, why do you need a serious relationship? You can treat women like animals and dogs. So therefore, he never actually gets to have a real relationship with another human being. In other words, the life he lives as a male is actually severely cut off. And so what this means is he's cut off not only from how he can perform who he is, but also he's cut off in terms of the emotions he'll allow himself to feel, which means, in a sense, he never actually becomes an entirely authentic human being. So, for example, yeah.
so would it be that, would he be cut off of society's aspects on how they look at him and how they portray him as a person?
Well,
Would that be another effect?
When you look at, for example, the works of Michel Foucault, he talks a lot about what happens when you kind of go, how do you say it? When you transgress society's laws. And the first thing that, of course, happens is you're alienated, and then you have to be punished somehow, and then society will try to change you continuously until you change, or you just get alienated. For example, a woman tells her family she wants to get a sex reassignment surgery, and her family disowns her. The disowning isn't because, get away from me. It's an attempt to force you to go back in line, in a sense.
And isn't there also some who have they come out with, they're born with both parts and have to decide
Yeah.
whether they have to be male or female? That's a strain as well on the parents, because one sexuality is going to be more dominant than the other, and it's kind of hard to try to decipher which one you want your child to be.
And the problem is that there are a variety of sexualities. There's a variety of identities. It's just our society doesn't like that idea, so we say, okay, you're going to be a male or a female. But other societies, a lot of Native American tribes, for example, believe in 3 sexes. Or the ancient European cultures believed if you were born a hermaphrodite, that you were a god. But in our society, we don't allow you to stay a hermaphrodite. You instantly have to be changed because of a binary that's going on there. Let's see what's after that. Okay, go back to this. So the bottom line here is that it's only through what Freire is explaining that any kind of equality can occur. The oppressed, in a sense, while they are liberating themselves, must simultaneously liberate their oppressor. So feminism, as an action, not only helps to liberate women, but it's also helping the liberation of men. For example, I remember seeing in the news, I think a year ago, a company refused to give a single father a sick leave to take his child to the hospital because they believed as a man he was more capable. So because he was male, even though he was still the only person taking care of his kid, they denied him. The assumption being, of course, men are more capable and women aren't. So, in fact, even in when the National Organization for Women chapter here at TAMUK was able to watch the Gloria Steinem and Bell Hooks conversation at the Cassandra Voss Center, one thing that Gloria Steinem brought up is there are a lot of men nowadays who have to take care of their families, especially the elderly in their families. And that action in itself is a feminist stance in a sense. So the more kind of attempts that are made, these attempts to transgress, as bell hooks would call them, these transgressions slowly eat away at these ideas of what is masculine and what is feminine and what is what. Technically, scientifically, there isn't even two genders. There's no two sexes either. Science has already proven genetically that there is no two sexes in each animal. It's one animal species with specializations of the same parts. I mean, if you look at male, a chart on male genitalia and female genitalia, it's the same genitalia, just flipped in different ways. But it still has the same pattern to it. Yeah. What do you think?
I believe that, like, they all have the same aspects, but just different, like, how do you say it, perceptions?
Yeah. And this isn't to say in any way that men do not oppress women more than women oppress men. I mean, without question, historically, men have been like 99% of the time, it's been men abusing women.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean that it has to be this way, and that's something else Foucault talks about. There's the capability of redefining not only human gender performance, performativity, but also these. But there's also the issue of humanitarianism. I was reading an article about why isn't feminism called humanitarianism? Humanitarianism meaning we should be looking for the well-being and equality of all people no matter what they are. And the bottom line is, according to what the article I read, which seems a little weak to me, is that feminism stands as its own because even if we had a humanitarian movement, somehow women would still not have as much representation. Shrug on that one. But it's interesting because there are an enormous amount of feminists out there that do not believe men have a right to have a conversation. But I mean, thinking about wanting to have equal respect in a relationship, a woman with a man, for example, you would have to have a conversation at one point with men. There's no way you can have equality for women without talking to the men who don't give that equality.
And some, maybe, because like I've seen a lot of this, like some women are afraid of how men will approach the sensitivity of the situation. And that's why they say, oh, men should not have an input. But me personally, I feel that some men who really believe in feminism and feel like it is a great aspect to bring to the table, I feel like they should have an opinion because most of them are just for women just as much as women,
Yeah.
In my opinion, a lot of what has gone wrong with the feminist movement, and I have been alive enough to have seen a lot of it go wrong, is that the females had a conversation and they didn't tell the guys, but they held them accountable to it. So there was a standard out there that we wanted the guys to live up to, and when they didn't understand that the expectation was there, we bitch slapped them. And does that help anything? No, it really doesn't. And when you look at Freire's concept of pedagogy of the oppressed, and you look at Raymond's analogy of if you began any process, whether establishing a patriarchal or establishing a feminism, if you begin by putting up walls of division, are you going to arrive at equity?
Yeah. I think that's the biggest problem with feminism is that even when feminism, was in its heyday, it totally disincluded racial minorities, socioeconomic minorities. It was all about the suffering of the middle-class white woman. And screw everyone else that don't know what oppression is. And, they're talking to poor black women, poor Latin American women.
It's like they're minimizing their...
Exactly.
Yeah, like the whole...
And so when feminism no longer could address those, it just fell apart because everyone started creating their own version of feminism.
Just going around the table, what do you think was the heyday of feminism? What was the heyday of feminism? When was feminism the strongest?
I would say the 1900s, around that time maybe. Maybe a little bit before.
What did they accomplish?
Yeah, 1920s.
What did they accomplish during their big heydays?
Just women being able to vote.
The vote.
Them having a say-so in politics. Women's rights, yeah. And that kind of, the suffrage, it kind of brought, the Depression even brought some of that in as well. So.
And the war, whenever the men left and Rivet Rosie ended up having to take over, the role of the man and prove that the woman could take over. But then it went from being a suffragette, which was attaining vote, to being a human right, to being the right to reproduction. And we pretty much haven't redefined after that. We haven't really defined the role after that.
And I think that's the biggest, another main issue is, as feminism moves forward, it has to continuously reassess what it needs or what it wants, and sticking with just the old-fashioned ideas of feminism doesn't work as you move into the 21st century.
And also, feminism has to be explained. It seems like people don't really know the actual definition of feminism.
How many of you know what feminism is?
See, that's what I'm saying. Like, some people still don't know the
And
actual
even if you
definition.
talk to them, I talk to my niece all the time about feminism. She don't know.
She's in the room.
Many people have so many definitions for feminism. Man bashers.
Yes.
All this stuff. We've had so many definitions of feminism and how people see us as those people that attack the men.
And it creates a binary of, for example, there have been cases, I know a lot of, we argue all the time about this one, about cases where men are raped by women, and a lot of people don't believe that's even possible. Or, of course, the first idea when someone suggests that a man's raped, the first thing they think is a man's raped them. But it is possible for a woman to rape a man. It's just, it's not common. And for the most part, there is definitely an education of aggression and violence taught to males from the moment they're born.
And also, there's a lot, like, if people don't believe that men get raped, go to the jail system. People in jail, men get raped in jail like almost 35% of the time. And people don't even know it. Even outside of jail, people that, like women, have too much to drink, go somewhere like that, and then they end up meeting another male who has raped them. So yes, it is possible for men to get raped. It's kind of crazy how people don't see it like that. Oh, how can you get this? And even with women are more aggressive than men if you really think about it. Like women has just as much power as men do. And they don't see it like that. Oh, how you let that little girl? No, that little girl got strength. Like it's only so many people can like say, oh, how can you do this or how can this happen? It's possible.
I raised a son. He's 37, and two daughters at 31 and 32. So I've gotten to see, the differences in the sexes, and they all learned how to cook, and they all had to clean, and this and that. So there was some equality that went on there. But for the most part, it would be very difficult for me to say, I want to take everything, from my son and my daughters and redistribute it to them equally. Because I don't understand the concept of equality when I look at my children, then it becomes really difficult. And I love Bell Hooks' definition of feminism. Feminism, to Bell Hooks, is being able to look at the people around her, both female and male, and say, I want the opportunity to walk side by side with you. I don't necessarily need to get behind you or ahead of you. I just want to be able to walk side by side. And as TAMUK now, I think it's a good place for us to start the discussion of feminism and not, wanting to be exclusive away from the men, because I assure you that if we continue along the line of excluding the men from the concept of feminism and understanding of feminism, you're not going to arrive at a society of feminists. We're still going to be holding males responsible for something that we never told them was there. It's not very fair. It's not a very fair agenda.
Well, you see, that kind of brings up the biggest problem, is finding ways to re-educate. And I think it boils down to what Bell Hooks talks about in the book Teaching to Transgress, which is every tiny action, every little action that we do that is transgressive, which means breaks these ideas of women's weakness and males' strength and violence. Every little thing we do adds up. Just like, for example, in racial equality, every time a minority succeeds, it's a movement towards recognition and equality. Any questions or thoughts, anybody?
Are we heading in the right direction for you as a group? Yes. Males, females, are you comfortable with being a member of something that's called National Organization for Women, but still staunchly wants to respect men and women of all gender, of all sexes and all orientations?
If you're done, we're not offended.
No, we're not offended. We still want to have the conversation. We still believe everybody belongs under the same tent so we can have the conversation.
And real quick, just popped into my head. It's common to have this assumption that gay men aren't misogynist, meaning hate women or abusive to women. But in reality, isn't it all on all levels of what it is to be a man that you find misogyny? In fact, I would argue that a part of the definition to be a male is technically to hate everything that is female or considered feminine. That doesn't mean every male out there believes this or does it, but I think it kind of boils down to a fundamental education from the moment of birth. It's a complicated issue. There's no clear answer for any of it.
Okay. So any more questions or comments? All right, well, let's thank him